Okay, this topic is more political than religious, but in the US, conservative Christians are among those most likely to consider mask-wearing requirements during a pandemic to be a violation of their inalienable constitutional rights. They're often the ones who disdain science-based policy and demand the right for churches to remain open, and they want to be exempt from social distancing and mask-wearing mandates. This anti-science attitude has been developing for a long time, starting with creationism and moving on to abortion, stem cell research, climate change, vaccines, and most recently the pandemic. Conservative media sources like Fox News have only added fuel to the fire by politicizing anti-science views, and their viewers have consistently rated lower in factual knowledge than viewers of any other popular news sources. The results have been that churches have become coronavirus hotspots, rapidly spreading COVID-19 throughout their communities. Faith is no match for a virus. The biggest problem for those who claim that mask requirements are a violation of our inalienable constitutional rights is that our rights have never actually been absolute. Like it or not, there have essentially always been limits to those freedoms. For example, we have the right to freedom of speech, but we aren't allowed to yell fire in a theater, nor are we allowed to commit libel or slander. And for those who consider walking around naked in public to be a freedom of speech issue, that's not allowed either. We have the right to freedom of religion, but we aren't allowed to go into churches from other religions and force them to listen to our proselytizing, even if proselytizing is central to our religion. And we aren't allowed to kill apostates, even if our religion demands their death. We have the right to keep and bear arms, but we aren't allowed unrestricted ownership of certain weapons like machine guns, sawed-off shotguns, anti-aircraft missiles, nukes, etc. And we generally aren't allowed to shoot firearms in populated areas either. Basically, if something can harm others, it can be regulated or banned, even if it conflicts with some of our inalienable constitutional rights. This is why we can be required to wear seatbelts and put kids in car seats to protect both ourselves and our passengers. It's also why we're not permitted to drive under the influence of drugs or alcohol, and why smoking is banned in almost all businesses and government buildings. Furthermore, private businesses can impose even more restrictions on individual rights. They can have terms of service that require users to be polite and respectful. They can require their staff to wear uniforms and hairnets, and demand their customers wear a shirt and shoes, or even a suit and tie. And they can basically refuse service for almost any reason. So if government and private businesses can legally impose restrictions on our constitutional rights in order to protect the public, or even to maintain certain preferred standards, then they can mandate the wearing of masks for those able to do so. Also, this pandemic is an emergency situation. Protecting our country against threats during an emergency often requires some temporary sacrifice, and civil liberties have often been legally suspended or curtailed in such circumstances. For example, during World War II, citizens were often required to turn off their lights at night to avoid enemy ships and planes spotting their towns. Curfews can also be imposed in emergencies. Citizens have even lost their rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness by being drafted into the military against their will and sent overseas to fight and die. Is wearing a mask more of an imposition than that? There are those who argue that we should just let everyone get infected and accept a certain number of deaths in order to keep the economy healthy. That way we could achieve herd immunity, which would reduce the number of available hosts to the point where the virus just dies out. And healthy economies save lives. The problem is, achieving herd immunity from COVID-19 could potentially mean millions of deaths. It could also mean tens of millions of people requiring medical care, which would overwhelm our hospitals and cause many of those patients to die unnecessarily. In addition, a large percentage of hospital patients suffer long-term or permanent heart damage, lung damage, strokes, cognitive and neurological problems, and more, which would cause a massive drain on our economy. If that's not enough, coronaviruses mutate and the population could easily be reinfected with a whole new strain. All of this would be a much greater hit to the economy than we would have by simply wearing masks, along with maintaining social distancing and washing hands. The US is an individualistic country, and so there will always be some citizens who refuse to wear a mask even if it is mandated. But since wearing masks has been demonstrated to reduce infections, save lives, and allow economies to, cautiously, open up, I think there have to be some negative consequences for those who refuse to participate, at least until we get a vaccine. And that's another sore spot for religious people, as well as conspiracy theorists. If and when we develop an effective vaccine against this coronavirus, there will certainly be those who refuse to be vaccinated. They should know, however, that the Supreme Court ruled in 1905 that vaccines can be made compulsory. But even when a vaccine for a dangerous disease is not ruled compulsory, I think the price the unvaccinated should pay is to be required to stay away from schools, churches, stadiums, rallies, and other group activities. Yes, it sucks to be made to choose between one freedom and another, but sometimes that's what's necessary to protect the population. And it's been that way since the beginning of our country. George Washington, who presided over the Constitutional Convention that gave us our rights, required all new Army recruits to be vaccinated against smallpox. All today's military members are still required to be vaccinated against a variety of diseases. Anyway, for those who still think mask-wearing mandates are unacceptable, why not just do it out of empathy and because you care about other people? Evidently, masks are more effective at protecting others from one's own aerosolized saliva and mucus than they are at protecting oneself, so wearing masks shows consideration for others. And when the people around you wear masks, they reduce the odds of infecting you. Even if you're young and healthy and stand a good chance of surviving the symptoms with relative ease, you can infect your friends and family who might not be so fortunate. And as someone who is fit and healthy, yet who suffered for weeks from COVID-19 symptoms and took months to fully recover, I can tell you, you don't want to go through what I went through.